My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight. Rain was hammering the roof of that broken-down cabin like it wanted to tear it apart, and I'd just fallen sideways into a wall that shouldn't have given way. But it did. My fist punched clean through the wet plaster all the way up to my elbow. I froze there half kneeling in the dark waiting for spiders or rats or something worse to come pouring out at me. Nothing came, just cold air and the smell of old metal. I pulled my arm back, slow lifted the flashlight, and shined it into the hole. Lord have mercy, there were boxes in there. Heavy iron lock boxes stacked from the floorboards, clean up to the ceiling, packed tight behind a wall my grandfather had built with his own two hands more than 30 years ago. And I hadn't even known that man. I was 18 years old sitting alone in a mountain cabin in eastern Kentucky, and 3 weeks earlier, I'd been thrown out of the only home I'd ever known with nothing but a black garbage bag of clothes to my name. If you've ever felt like the whole world locked its door behind you on a cold night, friend, pull your blanket a little closer, because you need to hear this story. The grandfather clock in the foyer struck midnight, 12 slow chimes, each one heavier than the last, like nails being driven into a coffin. I stood at the bottom of that sweeping mahogany staircase in the Whitmore mansion, the only house I'd ever called home, and I listened to the sound of my whole life ending. October the 14th, my 18th birthday. No cake, no candles, no one singing, just the sharp, ugly sound of packing tape being ripped from a dispenser. My stepmother Vivian stood on the third step from the bottom. Silk robe, manicured hands, a mug of black coffee steaming in her fingers like she was about to sit down and read the morning paper. Not like a woman throwing an orphan out into a Kentucky rainstorm at midnight. The trust is very specific, Caleb. Her voice was smooth, almost bored. My legal obligation to house and provide for you terminates upon your 18th birthday. I've had the housekeeper pack the essentials. She nodded toward the front door. A black garbage bag, slumped against the oak panels like something the trash men forgot. That was me, 18 years of my life, zipped up in 40 gallons of black plastic. I couldn't move. My legs wouldn't work. Because my daddy had been dead 10 months. Because my mama had been dead 12 years. Because outside that oak door, there was nothing but rain and darkness and a whole state full of people who didn't know my name. Vivian, my voice came out cracked. It's pouring rain. I haven't finished high school yet. Where am I supposed to go? She sipped her coffee. You should have thought about your future before your father drove this estate into the ground. She smiled thin and sharp. The trust is what it is, sweetheart. I'm sorry. She wasn't sorry. Lord in heaven, she wasn't sorry at all. Preston was leaning against the banister behind her. 19 years old, Vivian's boy from her first marriage. Or so I had always believed. He was spinning the keys to the sports car my daddy had bought him last Christmas back when we were all still pretending to be a family. He smirked at me, but there was something odd in his eyes when he did it, something that didn't match the smirk. I did not have time to think about it. Not then. Tough break, brother. He tossed the keys in the air and caught them. Better hustle. Last Greyhound out of Louisville leaves at 1. I wanted to hit him. I didn't. I stood there like a fool and stared at those car keys spinning in the light of the crystal chandelier my mama had picked out when she was still alive. And that's when the throat cleared behind me. Old Mr. Elias Thornton stepped out from the shadows of my daddy's study. Family lawyer. Been the family lawyer since before I was born. He was clutching that worn leather briefcase of his to his chest like a preacher holds a Bible in a hurricane. He looked sick. He looked ashamed. He looked like a man who wanted to say something but couldn't figure out where to start. Mrs. Whitmore, his voice was thin, the eviction is within your legal authority as trustee, but there is one remaining item from the estate of Caleb's maternal grandfather that has been held in escrow until his 18th birthday. As per the deceased's instructions. Vivian rolled her eyes so hard I thought they'd stick. Silas Hollister, that paranoid old hoarder. She laughed, actually laughed. What did he leave the boy? A rusted coffee can full of pennies, a tinfoil hat. Mr. Thornton didn't answer her. He didn't look at her. He walked slow across the marble floor, reached into the briefcase, pulled out a heavy manila envelope, wax seal on the flap, cracked and yellowed with age. He held it out to me. My fingers trembled when I took it. It was heavier than it looked, like there was a whole world folded up inside. It's the deed to a property, Caleb. His voice dropped low. A cabin on 40 acres of timberland, Whitley County, Kentucky, little town called Cedar Hollow. It's paid in full, free and clear. Nobody can take it from you. Cedar Hollow, I hadn't heard that name in 12 years. Vivian let out a sharp little laugh, like a knife scraping a plate. A rotting shack in the mountains. How fitting. She turned her back on me. Take your trash and your deed and get off my property, Caleb, before I call security. I didn't say another word. I don't know why. Maybe I couldn't. Maybe the words all dried up somewhere between my heart and my mouth. I picked up the garbage bag, tucked the manila envelope inside my jacket like it was made of glass, and I walked to the front door. The oak was heavy, colder than it should have been. I stepped out onto the front porch. The rain hit me like a slap. Behind me, the deadbolt clicked shut, and I was on the other side of the door I'd walked through every day of my life, and I was never going to walk through it again. I want to tell you something. I want to tell you what it feels like when the whole world locks its door behind you on a cold night. It doesn't feel like anger. Not at first. Anger comes later. It feels like being 6 years old and lost in a grocery store. That's what it feels like. You look around and the aisles are too tall and the faces are all strangers and your mama isn't there. And you understand for the very first time in your life that you are alone, truly alone. Except there was no mama coming back for me this time. Mama had been gone 12 years. I walked 3 miles in the rain to the Greyhound station on Broadway. I had $47 in my pocket. That was it. $47 and a plastic bag in an envelope from a dead man I barely remembered. The woman behind the ticket window looked me up and down like she'd seen 100 boys like me. Maybe she had. Where to, honey? I opened the envelope, right there on the counter, my wet fingers smearing the ink. There was a bus schedule paperclip to the deed. Someone had circled a stop in blue pen. Corbin, Kentucky. I read it out loud. That close to Cedar Hollow. She checked her monitor. Corbin's the closest. You'll have to hitch or catch the county bus the last 20 miles. $38, sweetheart. Bus leaves at 1:15. $9 left when I sat down on that hard plastic bench with my whole life on the seat beside me. $9. The Greyhound pulled out of Louisville at 1:15 in the morning. 14 hours to Corbin. 14 hours through the dark heart of Kentucky. I sat by the window. No, the bus wasn't full. A young man in a soldier's jacket was asleep across the aisle, his mouth open. I couldn't sleep. I pulled the envelope out from under my jacket and I opened it careful like I was defusing a bomb. The deed was on top. Heavy paper, official looking, Silas Roland Hollister deceased. Property transferred to Caleb Nathaniel Whitmore upon his 18th birthday. 40 acres. Miller's Ridge Road, Cedar Hollow, Whitley County, Kentucky. Under the deed there was a letter, handwritten. The paper was thin as onion skin. The handwriting was shaky, like it had been written by someone very old or very tired or very afraid. Caleb, if you are reading this, then I did not live to see you turn 18. I am sorry for that. I am sorry for a great many things. I know they told you I was crazy. Your grandmother's people, I mean. The Ashcrofts. They have been telling that lie for 30 years, and it is a very good lie because there is just enough truth mixed in with it to make it stick. I was not crazy, Caleb. I was afraid. There is a difference, though. Not many people know it. The cabin is yours now. Everything in it is yours. Everything under it. Everything inside its walls. When you were 6 years old, I held you on my knee, and I whispered something in your ear. Do you remember I told you when you feel cold in your heart, look for the warm place in the walls? I hope you remember. I hope you find it. I hope you forgive me for what I could not give you while I was alive. Your grandfather, Silas. I read that letter 3 times. Then I folded it back into the envelope. Then I pressed my forehead against the cold window, and I cried the way I had not cried since I was a little boy, because I did remember. I remembered him, Grandpa Silas, sitting on the front porch, swing of a house I could barely picture. His beard was white, and it scratched my cheek when he leaned close. He smelled like pipe tobacco and something sweeter underneath. Cedar shavings, maybe. And he had held my 6-year-old face between his 2 big rough hands, and he had whispered those exact words into my ear. 2 weeks later, my mama died in that car accident on Interstate 65, and I never saw Grandpa Silas again. Vivian moved into our house within a year. She told my daddy that Silas was a paranoid old man who had said terrible things at Mama's funeral. She told him it wasn't safe for a little boy to visit him. She said the courts would probably take me away if we tried. And my daddy believed her. Everybody believed her. Somewhere around Elizabethtown, an older woman across the aisle turned around and looked at me over her half-moon glasses. You've been crying for 200 miles, honey. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I'm sorry, ma'am. Don't apologize to me for feeling something. She reached into a big canvas bag, pulled out a foil-wrapped biscuit sandwich, passed it back to me between the seats. Eat this, you look hollow. I hadn't eaten since breakfast the day before. I took that sandwich in both hands like it was communion. I ate it slow. I don't think anything has ever tasted like that before or since. Bread and butter and country, ham, and the kindness of a stranger going somewhere I would never know. She turned back to face the front. I want you to remember that woman, because there are people in this story who did terrible things to me, but there are more people, so many more, who did small good things for no reason at all. That woman was the first of them. She was not the last. We rolled into Corbin at 3:15 in the afternoon. The county bus for Cedar Hollow didn't run until 7 the next morning. I had $4 and change in my pocket. An old man with a truck full of hay stopped and rolled his window down. "You waiting on somebody, son?" "No, sir. I'm trying to get to Cedar Hollow." He looked at me a long moment. Then he tilted his head at the passenger seat. "Get in. I'm going as far as the crossroads. That'll save you 8 miles. I got in. I didn't ask me anything. Not my name, not where I came from, not why an 18-year-old boy was hitching a ride to Cedar Hollow. The heater in his truck was broken. The radio played a country station low and staticky, an old Hank Williams song I recognized because my daddy used to play it in the garage when he was working on his car. I remembered my daddy. I remembered the way he laughed, the way he called me buddy when I was little, the way his eyes had gone flat and tired those last 2 years of his life after he married Vivian. Something twisted deep in my chest. I hadn't let myself think about my daddy since the funeral. The old farmer let me out at a gravel crossroads. "Cedar Hollow's that way." He pointed down a 2-lane road. "About 6 miles. There's a diner in the middle of town called Odessa's. Tell her Royce sent you. She'll feed you." He drove away. I walked. 6 miles. The mountains rose up around me as I walked, brown and gold and orange with October. Once in a while, a pickup truck would pass and someone would raise 2 fingers off the steering wheel in a wave, the way people wave in the country. I didn't wave back. I didn't know how. I came around a bend in the road, and there it was. Cedar Hollow, Kentucky, sitting in a shallow valley between 2 ridges. A single stoplight, blinking yellow. A little brick post office. A feed store with a rusty green tin roof. A boarded-up movie theater with the word Bijou still ghosting across the marquee. 2 church steeples. A hardware store with a wooden porch. And in the middle of Main Street with a red neon sign that said, "Open in the front window, a diner." Odessa's Kitchen, home cooking. Since 1979, I pushed open that door. A little brass bell jingled overhead. Every head in the place turned to look at me. If you believe that family is sometimes found in places we never expected to look, would you leave the word amen in the comments before we go on? I want to know who is with me tonight. She was standing behind the counter with a coffee pot in her hand. 68 years old, I didn't know that yet. Silver hair pulled back in a low bun, reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck, cheeks pink from the heat of the kitchen. A white apron over a soft blue dress. She looked at me, really looked at me. Not just glance. Her eyes traveled from my soaked jacket to my mud-caked tennis shoes to the bag in my hand and back up to my face. Something changed in her expression. I couldn't read what it was. "Well," her voice was warm as an oven, "you look like a drowned puppy, honey. Come sit down, coffee's on the house." I slid into a booth, red vinyl cracked in a few places, formica table with a napkin dispenser and a little glass sugar shaker. There was a jukebox in the corner, playing Patsy Cline low and sad. She brought a mug and filled it. The coffee was black and strong and it burned all the way down. "You passing through or you stayin'?" I tried to answer. My voice caught. I tried again. "I'm looking for a property out on Miller's Ridge, the Hollister cabin. My grandfather left it to me." The coffee pot in her hand went very still. The 2 men at the counter stopped talking. The old fellow in the corner booth put down his newspaper. Even Patsy Cline seemed to hold her breath in the middle of a phrase. She set the pot down slow. She pulled the reading glasses up off her chest and settled them on her nose. She leaned across the counter and looked at me. Really, really looked at me. "Honey," her voice had changed. It was quieter now, almost trembling. "Say your name." Caleb Whitmore." She put her hand over her mouth. "Elena's boy." It wasn't a question. I nodded. She sat down on the stool behind the counter like her knees had given out. She stared at me over that formica counter, and her eyes filled up with tears, and she said the last thing in the world I expected to hear. She said, "I've been waiting for you for 12 years. I couldn't speak. "You have to understand. Nobody had said my mother's name to me in 12 years. Not my daddy in the last few years of his life, because Vivian didn't like it. Not Vivian, obviously. Not Preston. Not the housekeeper. Not any of the people who came in and out of that Louisville mansion. Elena Hollister Whitmore. She had died on Interstate 65 when I was 6 years old, and it was like the world had made a decision not to say her name anymore. And now in a diner in the town I had never seen before. In the middle of the Cumberland foothills, a woman I had never met was crying because I looked like my mama's boy. She came around the counter. She sat down across from me in the booth. She took my hand across the formica. Her hand was warm, softer than I expected. There was a wedding ring on her third finger and a scar across the back of her thumb from something long ago. Your mama and me. She had to stop. Swallow. Try again. Your mama and me was best friends since we were 8 years old. Corbin Elementary, then Corbin High. We sat next to each other in home EC. She made the worst apple pie in the state of Kentucky, and I loved every terrible slice of it. She laughed. It came out shaky. When she left Cedar Hollow at 19 to go to Louisville, I thought she was running towards something better. Took me a long time to figure out she was running away from something worse. What was she running from? Her eyes went guarded. She glanced at the 2 men at the counter. They pretended to look at their coffee. Not here, honey, not now. Some things ain't for the diner. She squeezed my hand. You had anything to eat today? Country ham biscuit. On the bus. That's what I thought. She got up. She walked back to the kitchen window and hollered through it. Ramon, 2 eggs over medium, bacon hash browns, biscuit and gravy. On the house. And if you tell anybody I said that, I'll fire you. She came back with a plate of something warm before I'd even finished my coffee. I ate like I was afraid the food would disappear. She watched me eat. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then quiet. Quiet, so you got the cabin. I nodded, mouthful. You seen it yet? I shook my head. She sighed, long and slow. Honey, that cabin has been sitting up there empty 5 years. Your grandpa was... She paused, choosing her words careful. Your grandpa was a man who saw things other people didn't see. Some folks called that crazy. I never did. He tore the inside of that cabin apart the last few years of his life, nailed lead sheets over the windows. Wouldn't let a soul on the property. When he died at the county hospital in 2020, the state locked it up and nobody's been up there since. How do I get there? She pulled a napkin out of the dispenser and took a pen from her apron pocket. She drew me a map. 4 miles up the Logan Road off Route 92. Mudslide took out the last 2 miles of pavement back in 2018. Ain't nobody driving up there. You'll have to walk. You got a flashlight? No, ma'am. She got up, disappeared into the back, came back with a heavy old mag light and a rain poncho folded up small. Take these, and you listen to me, Caleb Whitmore. She leaned across the table. Her eyes were fierce. Storm coming in tonight is going to be a bad one. National Weather Service said flash floods after 10. You get inside that cabin before dark. You hear me? Yes, ma'am. And tomorrow morning you come back down here. Yes, ma'am. There are things I have to give you, Caleb. Things that belong to your mama. Things I promised her I'd keep safe, but not tonight. I stared at her. Things that belong to my mama. Her eyes filled up again. 12 years, honey. 12 years I've been keeping them in a hat box under my bed. Never thought I'd be the one to hand them back. She stood up. Now go on, move. The sky's already turning green out there. At the door, I turned around. Miss Odessa, thank you for the food, for... I couldn't finish. She waved me off, turned her face away so I wouldn't see the tears. Just get up that mountain, Caleb. The logging road was worse than she'd said. 6 inches deep in cold red mud where the pavement gave out. The wind was picking up. The trees on either side of the road were tall and skeletal, standing shoulder to shoulder like they were watching me. I climbed. 4 miles is not a long way when you're on a paved road with a car. 4 miles is a very long way when you're 18 years old dragging your whole life up a washed-out mountain track with the light dying out of the sky. My tennis shoes filled up with mud, then with water, then with something colder than water. I passed a rusted barbed wire fence with a hand-lettered sign nailed to a fence post. No trespassing. Hollister land. This means you. I climbed higher. I came around a bend, and I saw it. The cabin sat in a small clearing at the top of the ridge. Long and low and made of dark timber that had gone almost black with age. The porch on the front was sagging on one side, one support post rotted through and just holding on by the paint. The roof was covered in moss, not a little moss, a whole rug of moss thick as a blanket, and the windows. Every single window in that cabin was covered from the inside with sheets of dark gray metal. Not boarded up, not curtained, sealed, like the inside of the cabin didn't want any light getting in or any light getting out. I stood there in the clearing and I looked at that cabin. My grandfather had lived here, alone for 30 years, and done what? There was a big wooden sign nailed above the front door. The paint was almost gone, but I could still read it. Silas Roland Hollister, 1944-2020, an honest man. Somebody had gone up there with a can of paint after he died and put that sign up. The first fat, cold raindrop hit the back of my neck. Then the sky opened up. I ran. I ran across that muddy clearing, and I hit the front porch, and the boards groaned like they might give way under me, and I grabbed the door handle and I turned it. It wasn't locked. The door swung open with a long, slow groan of rusted hinges. And the smell hit me. Mildew, dust, old paper, cold iron, something faintly sweet underneath like pipe tobacco that had gone stale a long time ago. I stepped inside, I clicked on the flashlight. You know how sometimes you walk into a place and you can just feel that something happened there? That's how it felt. The main room was maybe 20 feet by 30 feet. A big stone fireplace on the far wall, cold and dark. A cast iron wood stove sat in the corner opposite, squat and heavy. A ruined couch with the stuffing pulled out of it. A table with two chairs, one of them tipped over. And the walls, Lord, the walls. They weren't logs the way I would have expected in a mountain cabin. They were plastered. Every inch of every interior wall was covered in thick, smooth, sterile-looking plaster. Painted white a long time ago, gone yellow with time, the walls were thick, way too thick. I could see from the window frames how deep they were. At least a foot thick, where there should have been maybe 4 inches. The whole inside of the cabin had been made smaller, like somebody had built a second cabin inside the first cabin. I ran my hand along the plaster. It was cold, and there was something drawn on it. I lifted the flashlight higher. The walls were covered in drawings, not paintings, not pictures, carvings. Somebody had taken a knife or a nail or a piece of broken glass and carved shapes into the plaster. Circles inside circles. Dates, numbers, names crossed out with angry X's. Some of it was words. Some of it was diagrams that looked like the wiring of a machine I couldn't understand. I saw the word Ashcroft carved deep into the wall next to the fireplace, crossed out 3 times. I saw the words follow the money. I saw a list of numbers that looked like serial numbers. I saw in the corner near the stove, in tall, shaky letters, they think I'm crazy. Good, let them think it. I sat down in the middle of that floor and I turned off the flashlight and I sat in the dark and I listened to the storm come down on the roof. The rain got worse. It went from a downpour to something biblical. The whole cabin shuddered under the weight of it. Wind was pushing against the walls hard enough that I could hear the timbers groaning. Every few minutes, the sky would flash white through the cracks in the boarded windows, and thunder would roll down the mountain like God dragging furniture across the sky. I found a dry corner. I pulled some of the ruined couch stuffing around me. I ate a granola bar Odessa had slipped into my poncho pocket without telling me. I did not sleep. Around 2 in the morning, there was a crack of thunder so loud I felt it in my teeth. Right after it, I heard water. Not outside, inside. The roof had sprung a leak, a big one. The water was pouring down not on the floor but on the wall opposite the wood stove. The plaster wall Grandpa Silas had carved his angry secrets into. The water was coming down that wall in a sheet. And the plaster, oh Lord, the plaster. It was already old, already crumbling, and now it was getting soaked top to bottom and starting to sag away from whatever was behind it. I could hear it. Wet, mushy, giving up sounds. I stood up, clicked on the flashlight. My tennis shoe hit a slick spot on the wet floorboards. My feet went out from under me. I fell forward, hard, and I put both hands out to catch myself against the wall. My palms hit the wet plaster, and the wet plaster gave way. Both hands right up to my elbows. The wall swallowed my arms. I stopped breathing. I couldn't move. I was on my knees, forehead pressed against soaking wet plaster, both arms sunk into a hole in the wall. I hadn't known was there, and my brain was screaming at me about spiders and rats and copperhead snakes and every terrible thing that could be inside a wall in the mountains of Kentucky. Nothing happened. Nothing crawled up my arms. The cavity behind the wall was just cold, just still, just empty. Slow, I pulled my arms back out. Plaster crumbled around me. There was a jagged, wet hole in the wall about the size of a laundry basket. I grabbed the flashlight off the floor. My hands were shaking so bad I had to hold it in both fists. I shined the beam into the hole, and I saw them, metal, cold, dull gray, not 1 box, not 2 boxes, not 10, stacked, floor to ceiling, in a 12-inch cavity my grandfather had built between the outer wall of the cabin and the inner wall. He had put up himself, iron lockboxes, lead-lined, every one of them the size of a big man's briefcase. And there had to be 40, 50, maybe more disappearing back into the darkness where the flashlight couldn't reach. I sat back on my heels in the wet. My grandpa's voice came back to me from 12 years ago, whispered against my 6-year-old ear on his summer porch. When you feel cold in your heart, look for the warm place in the walls. I pulled the first box free. It took me 20 minutes in both hands and a lot of grunting. It was wedged in tight, plaster dust in my mouth, water dripping down the back of my neck. The box came out heavy, heavier than it looked. I dragged it to the middle of the floor. Brass padlock on the front. Old. Rusted. I grabbed the iron poker from beside the stove. I wedged the point under the padlock hasp. I put my whole body weight on it. The rusted lock groaned, fought me, then gave way with a sharp metal snap. I threw the lid back. Money, that's what I thought at first. But it wasn't right. It didn't look like the money in my wallet. It didn't look like any money I'd ever seen. It was bigger. The paper was heavier. The engraving was thick and beautiful with bald eagles and ornate borders and old-fashioned typography. I picked up one bill in shaking fingers. At the top it read, "The United States of America." Then in the middle, gold certificate. Then in enormous letters, $10,000. There was a portrait of a man I didn't recognize. Underneath tiny letters, Salmon P. Chase. I put the bill down like it was on fire. I stared at the open lockbox. There had to be 100 bundles just like the one I'd picked up. Maybe 200. Each one tied with faded twine. And this was one box. There were dozens more on the wall behind me. Under the bundles, at the bottom of the lockbox, there was something else. A book. A thick black leather-bound book with a cracked spine. I lifted it out carefully. The pages were brittle. The leather was cool. The first page had a date at the top. November 14th, 1990. The handwriting was cramped and neat and furious. They think they buried the truth with Cornelius Ashcroft's promotion. But I have found the ledgers, the pension fund of Cedar Hollow. $12.4 million. Every dime of it stolen from 340 families in this county. Every dime of it laundered through shell companies and brought back into this country as untraceable bearer bonds. I am the county auditor. I am the only man in Whitley County who understands what they have done. I have 3 weeks to figure out what to do before they finish the transfer. God help me. God help my daughter. God help my grandson when he grows up and finds out what these people are. I turned the page with a hand I could barely control. There was a list at the top of the next page, underlined 3 times. The architects. 7 names, a state senator, a county judge, a former sheriff, the president of a regional bank, a doctor from Lexington. And at the top of the list, circled in ink so dark and hard, the pen had almost torn through the paper, Cornelius Rutledge Ashcroft. I sat there, kneeling on the wet floorboards of a broken-down cabin in the mountains of Kentucky at 3 in the morning. Cornelius Ashcroft, my stepmother's father, the man whose funeral I had attended when I was 11 years old, the man whose oil painting hung over the fireplace of the Whitmore mansion in Louisville, right where the painting of my own mother used to be before Vivian took it down. My grandfather had known. He had known. 35 years ago, and he had spent the rest of his life hidden in this cabin guarding what he had done. Because he hadn't just found the stolen money. He had stolen it back. I sat there for a long time. I don't know how long. The storm got quieter. The rain slowed to a heavy, steady drum. The thunder moved on over the next ridge. Somewhere very far away, a rooster crowed. The sky through the cracks in the boarded windows started to turn from black to the dark gray of dawn. That's when I heard it, down at the bottom of the ridge, faint at first and then getting louder. Tires, heavy tires, grinding through mud. Coming up the logging road. The logging road Odessa had told me nobody could drive on. I got up, slow, careful. I crossed to the window nearest the door. I found a crack in the metal sheeting where a piece had bent away from the frame. I put my eye to the crack. A black SUV was pulling into the clearing. Big, expensive. Tinted windows. Custom off-road tires caked with red Kentucky mud. It stopped at the edge of the yard about 50 feet from the porch. The engine cut off. The driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out, 50s, silver hair, long black raincoat. He looked around the clearing, slow and careful the way a hunter looks around a clearing before he takes his rifle off his shoulder. He was carrying 2 things. In his left hand, a manila folder, legal papers of some kind. In his right hand, a black satellite phone. He lifted the phone to his ear. His voice carried across the wet clearing on the still morning air. "Mrs. Whitmore, it's Donovan. I'm at the cabin. The Thornton geezer was right, the deed transfer went through, but there's mud tracks on the porch, fresh. He's already up here." A pause, then softer, colder. "Yes, ma'am, understood. If the boy's inside, we make it look like exposure. And if he found the walls, another pause. Yes, ma'am. Then you already know what needs to happen. He hung up. He looked toward the cabin. He started walking toward the porch. I could not breathe. My eye was still pressed to the crack in the metal sheeting. My lungs had just stopped working, like somebody had unplugged them. Rex Donovan was walking toward the porch. Slow, not hurried. The way a man walks when he knows the thing he's hunting has nowhere else to go. His boots crunched in the wet gravel. Make it look like exposure. Those were the words he had said into that satellite phone, into Vivian's ear. Make it look like exposure. And I understood that this was not a lawyer come to serve me papers. This was a man Vivian had sent up a mountain in a rainstorm to end me. My whole body went cold, then hot, then cold again. Think, Caleb, think. Except I could not think. Except the front door was the only door. Except every window was sealed shut from the inside with iron sheets my grandfather had bolted in place 30 years ago. Except I was going to die in this cabin, and Vivian was going to buy a new pair of Italian shoes with what she found in these walls. And that thought right there, that was the thought that saved my life. Because it made me angry. Not scared, angry. The kind of angry that clears your head like a slap. The kind of angry my mama used to get when somebody was cruel to a stranger in the grocery store. The kind of angry that says, not today, not to me, not at my grandpa's house. I looked around the cabin, slow, careful, the flashlight beam moving inch by inch. A man that paranoid would not build himself into a box with only one door. Come on, Grandpa, come on, talk to me. The flashlight beam moved, past the ruined couch, past the broken rocking chair, past the table with the tipped-over chair, past the stone fireplace dead and cold. The beam stopped, on the wood stove. The big cast-iron wood stove, sitting in the corner opposite the fireplace. Squat, heavy, the kind of stove that weighed 400 pounds and hadn't been moved in 100 years. Except the floorboards underneath the wood stove were pristine. Every other inch of floor in that cabin was scuffed and scarred and dark with 3 decades of boots and mud. But the boards under that stove were clean pale wood, like the stove had been sliding back and forth over them, like the stove had been polishing the wood. Because the stove was on a track, I dropped to my knees. Under the front lip of the stove, half hidden by the shadow, I saw it. A heavy sheet of reinforced steel cut into a shallow tray shape with runners set into grooves in the floor. My grandfather had bolted his 400-pound cast-iron wood stove to a sliding platform. Because the stove was a door, bang, bang, 2 heavy blows on the front porch. Boots. He was on the porch now. Caleb Whitmore. His voice came through the door, calm, almost friendly. My name is Rex Donovan. I represent your stepmother's family. I just need to talk to you, son. I have some paperwork you need to see. Son. He called me son. I wanted to be sick. I grabbed my little school backpack, the one I'd stuffed my notebooks and my mama's Bible into on my way out of the Whitmore mansion 3 weeks ago. I shoved the black leather journal into it. I shoved 12 bundles of those old gold certificates into it. As many as would fit, I zipped it shut. Everything else I had to leave behind. 12 years of my life, left on the floor of a cabin in a mountain rainstorm. I did not have time to grieve it. I threw all my weight against the side of the wood stove. Nothing, nothing. Please, I pushed harder. Both hands, both feet planted, every muscle in my 18-year-old body screaming. The stove slid, 1 inch, then 2. Then with a screech of steel on steel that would have woken the dead, it slid 3 whole feet sideways along its track. Underneath, a hole. A perfectly square hole cut through the floorboards and the foundation and the earth below. About 2 feet by 2 feet, just wide enough for a man to shimmy through. Timber shored up the sides like an old coal mine shaft. My grandpa had dug an escape tunnel under his own house. That was the man Vivian called a lunatic. Crack, the deadbolt on the front door splintered. I did not look back. I threw the backpack in first. I sat on the edge of the hole. I pushed off with my hands. I dropped into the dark, cold. That was the first thing. The tunnel was tighter than the hole made it look. My shoulders scraped the sides. My knees hit rocks. My face went straight into a cobweb thick enough to catch a bird. I reached up above my head. I found the lip of the wood stove's sliding track. I gripped it with both hands. I pulled. The stove slid back into place with a heavy metal clunk, just as the front door of the cabin above me hit the interior wall with a bang. 2 sets of boots, not 1. 2, both of them running. Their weight vibrated through the floorboards inches above my head. Dirt rained down on my hair. I flattened myself against the tunnel wall. I did not breathe. He's not here. That was a second voice, rougher, younger. He has to be. Donovan. His calm voice was gone. He was rattled. The Callahan woman said she saw him. She said he walked up here at sunset. Well, he ain't here now, Rex. Silence. Then check the closets, check the loft, check every square foot of this shack. Their boots moved apart. One set stopped, right above my head, right above the wood stove. Rex Donovan was standing on top of my escape hatch. I heard the creak of leather as he bent down. I heard the strike of a match because he had lit a cigarette. Standing on top of me, he took two long, slow drags. I could smell the tobacco through the floorboards. Then he said, quiet almost to himself, "You are here somewhere, boy. I can feel you." I put both hands over my mouth, and then mercifully his boots moved. Toward the back of the cabin, away from me, I started to crawl. The tunnel sloped downhill, slow at first, then steeper, following the natural fall of the mountain ridge. My knees ripped through my jeans in the first 50 feet. Blood mixed with mud. I did not stop. I crawled. Somewhere behind me and above me, I heard a shout. Then a second shout, then Rex Donovan's voice, and even down in that hole, I could hear that his composure had cracked wide open. Mother of God. They had found the wall. They had found the hole I had punched in the wall. They had shined their flashlights in and seen what I had seen. Rex, what is this? It's the vault. Donovan's voice was breathless, awed. Sweet Mother of God, it's the vault. He actually did it. That old lunatic actually took it all back. A pause, then a laugh. Then his voice cold and businesslike again. Call her? Call Vivian. Tell her we found it. I crawled faster. Tears streaming down my face and blood in my palms and my mama's Bible thumping against my back inside the backpack. Because I finally understood what my grandfather had done. He had not been trying to keep the stolen money. He had been trying to keep 340 families safe from the people who stole it. And I had just handed it right back to them. The tunnel went on for a long time. 20 minutes. 30. Maybe more. I lost time down there in the dark. I thought about my mother. I remembered the way she used to smell, vanilla and coffee, and something soft I never had a name for. I remembered the way she sang to me. She had a bad voice. She knew it. She sang anyway. I remembered that she had grown up here, in these mountains, on this ridge. She had crawled up this ridge with her daddy Silas when she was a little girl, learning where the blackberries grew, and where the copperheads sunned themselves, and where the springs came up out of the rocks in August. And then she had left, at 19, alone, on a bus, because something in these mountains had scared her so bad she couldn't stay. I understood now. Cornelius Ashcroft. My mother had known. My mother had known what her father had discovered. My mother had run to Louisville because her father had told her to run. And she had married my father, Nathaniel Whitmore, because, except that thought was too big. I couldn't hold it. I crawled. The tunnel started to go up. Just a little, just enough that I noticed. Then I saw it. A pale gray disk of light very far away, way at the end. I crawled toward it like a man crawling out of hell. The tunnel ended in a rusted corrugated iron pipe, about 3 feet across, the other end tangled thick with blackberry vines so thick they had grown right across the mouth of the pipe like a screen. I could see through them. Just barely, the gray of morning. I pushed through. The thorns raked my face, my hands, my arms. I did not stop. I burst out of that pipe and rolled sideways into wet fern, and I lay on my back and I stared up at a Kentucky sky the color of a dove's wing. Alive. Somehow, alive. If you have ever been rescued by the kindness of a stranger when you needed it most, would you tap that like button for me, just so I know you're still with us? I do not remember how long I walked. I remember I was hungry. I remember my knees were bleeding through what was left of my jeans. I remember at some point I sat down on a fallen hickory log and I ate the last granola bar from Odessa's poncho pocket, and I drank water from a mountain stream with my hands cupped, and it tasted so cold and clean it made my back teeth hurt. I stayed away from the roads, because the roads were where a man like Rex Donovan would look for me. I walked through the woods, following the tumble of water down the mountain, because Odessa had said Cedar Hollow sat in a valley, and valleys are where the water goes. Somewhere around noon of the second day, I came out of the trees, and I saw a barbed wire fence. Behind the fence, in 100 acres of good bluegrass pasture, there was a red Hereford bull chest deep in the grass eating hay from a round bale like the world had been made for him personally. And beside him, unbothered, checking a strand of the barbed wire with a pair of pliers, was an old man. He was maybe 70 years old. weathered, wearing a Carhartt jacket that had seen 15 winters and a mesh feed cap so faded I could not tell what feed store it advertised. He looked up. He looked at me, standing in his tree line, covered in mud from crown to sole, blood dried on my face from the blackberry thorns. He did not startle. He did not reach for a rifle. He did not even take the pliers out of his hand. He just looked at me, a long, slow, careful look. The kind of look a farmer gives a colt he hasn't seen before. Then he said, "Son, you look like you have had a week." His voice was slow and dry, and it had a smile in it somewhere down deep. I opened my mouth to answer him. Nothing came out. My knees went liquid. The world tipped sideways. And the last thing I remember before the ground came up to meet me was that old farmer dropping his pliers and running toward the fence, faster than a 70-year-old man had any right to run. I woke up in a bed, a real bed, with sheets. The sheets smelled like line-dried cotton and lavender. The ceiling was made of tongue and groove pine painted white about 40 years ago. There was a shelf above the door with a row of old dolls sitting on it, their eyes closed, their dresses faded. I was in a little girl's bedroom, except the little girl had been grown up a long time. I could smell something cooking. Bacon, coffee, something buttery. The door opened. A woman stood there, 69 years old, though I did not know that yet. Silver white hair pinned up in a soft twist, a blue apron over a flannel shirt. She had one of those faces that looks like she has been kind for so long, her whole face has settled into it. She saw my eyes were open. She smiled. "Well," her voice was soft as an old quilt. "There he is. My husband was starting to think we'd have to bury you in the family plot." She came over. She sat on the edge of the bed. She did not touch me. She was letting me decide. "You've been asleep since yesterday afternoon, honey. Wendell brought you in. Dr. Emmett Purcell came out to look at you last night. Said you were dehydrated and had a fever and needed to sleep." I tried to speak. My voice was gone. She held up a hand. "Don't try yet. Water on the nightstand. Small sips. When you can walk kitchens, straight down the hall." She got up. At the door, she turned around. She looked at me for a long moment. Her head tilted to one side. Her eyes went strange and soft and full of something I could not read. "What's your name, honey?" "Caleb," I whispered. She nodded. Slow. "That's what I thought." She closed the door behind her. I got up. My backpack was on the chair by the bed. Still there, Bible inside, journal inside, 12 bundles of gold certificates inside. Unopened. She had not touched it. My jeans were washed and folded on top of the dresser. My t-shirt washed too. Somebody had darned the tear in the sleeve. I dressed slow. My knees were bandaged, neat white gauze. I opened the door. I walked down a hallway lined with the photographs. A little blonde girl on a pony. That same little girl in a graduation cap. That same girl grown up holding a baby. That same girl in a nurse's uniform. I did not know it yet, but every one of those pictures was of the same person. I came into the kitchen. The kitchen was warm. That is the first thing I remember about it. It was warm and it smelled like heaven, and there was so sunlight coming in the window over the sink, and there was a big wooden table with 4 chairs and a jar of dried flowers in the middle. The woman was at the stove. Beside her, sitting at the head of the table with a mug of coffee, was the old man from the pasture. He had washed up, combed his white hair back. He was wearing a clean flannel shirt. He looked up when I came in. "There he is." His voice was warm as the kitchen. "Merle, set another plate." Merle, the woman was already setting another plate. "Sit down, son." He nodded at the chair on his left. "Sit down and eat, and don't say a word till you've cleaned that plate." I sat down. Merle set a plate in front of me. 2 eggs over medium. 4 strips of thick bacon, a mountain of grits with a pat of butter melting into the middle of it, a biscuit split open with sausage gravy poured over it. I put my hands flat on either side of the plate. I bowed my head, and I did something I had not done in 12 years since before my mama died. I said grace out loud. "Dear Lord, thank you for this food, and thank you for the people who made it. In Jesus' name, amen." When I opened my eyes, Wendell had one hand across his mouth, and Merle was standing at the sink with her back to us, her shoulders shaking. I did not understand until later. They had raised a daughter in that house who used to say grace out loud in that exact voice, in that exact rhythm. And that daughter had been dead for 6 years. I ate everything, every bite. I could not have told you what it tasted like because I was crying while I ate. Silent crying, the kind that just runs down your face without permission. Wendell did not say a word. He just refilled my coffee twice. When my plate was empty, I put my fork down and I wiped my face with the back of my hand. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you." "Wendell," He held out one big rough hand across the table. Wendell Hensley, that's my wife Merle. This is our farm, Hensley Cattle since 1954. I shook his hand. Caleb, Caleb Whitmore. Wendell did not react, but Merle stopped drying the dish she was drying. She set the dish down, slow, careful. She turned around. She walked over to the table. She sat down across from me. She put her folded hands on the table between us. Whitmore, her voice was even. Any relation to Nathaniel Whitmore of Louisville? He was my daddy, ma'am. And your mama, honey. I could barely say it. Elena Hollister. Merle Hensley closed her eyes. She reached across the table and she took my hand. Her palm was warm and calloused, and her grip was surprisingly strong. Wendell, her voice did not shake. This is Silas's grandson. Wendell Hensley set down his coffee mug. He looked at me. Not the way you look at a stranger. The way you look at a photograph you have been searching for in a drawer for 6 years and finally found. Merle, his voice was very quiet. Do you see it too? I see it. The way he tilts his head when he's listening. Just like her. Wendell got up. He crossed the kitchen and stood at the window over the sink for a long moment, looking out at the pasture. When he turned back around, his eyes were red. Son, he crossed back to the table. He sat down. I need you to tell me the truth about something, and I need you to understand that whatever the truth is, you are safe in this house. You hear me? Yes, sir. Where have you been for the last 12 years? I told them. Once I started, I could not stop. I told them about my mother's death. I told them about Vivian moving in. I told them about the trust and the plastic bag and the rain. I told them about Odessa and the cabin. I told them about the storm and the wall and the lockboxes and the journal. I told them the name in the journal, Cornelius Ashcroft. Wendell Hensley's face went the color of ash. Vivian Ashcroft is Cornelius Ashcroft's daughter. His voice was flat. Yes, sir. Merle put both hands over her face. I told them about Rex Donovan on the porch, about the wood stove and the tunnel. When I finished, I was shaking. Wendell sat back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling. And he said very softly, he wasn't crazy, Merle. Silas wasn't crazy. No, honey. He was trying to tell us, all those years. He was. Wendell rubbed his face with both hands. Then he got up, went to the phone on the wall, an old rotary phone, cream-colored. He dialed a number he clearly knew by heart. Wade, it's Wendell. Get out here now. Bring your Bible and your badge and every ounce of patience your mama ever gave you. He hung up. He came back to the table. Caleb, there is a man in this town by the name of Wade Buckley. He is the sheriff of Whitley County. He is also the man who has been waiting 32 years to hear the story you just told me. I did not understand. 32 years ago in the fall of 1993, Wade's older brother Frank was the deputy sheriff of Whitley County. Frank was a good man. Frank came to Merle and me one October evening in this kitchen, and he sat in the chair you are sitting in right now. And he told us he had figured out what was happening with the pension fund. He said he was going to bring in the state police the next Monday. He said Cornelius Ashcroft was going to do time in a federal prison. Wendell's hand was shaking around his coffee mug. 2 nights later, Frank Buckley drove his patrol car off Route 92 into the North Fork of the Cumberland River. State police called it a single vehicle accident. Wet leaves on the road. He set the mug down. It clinked against the saucer. Wade Buckley was 23 years old. Never believed it was an accident. Not for one day of the last 32 years. Merle reached across the table, took my hand again. You have brought us the truth, honey. Sheriff Wade Buckley arrived 45 minutes later. He was 55 years old. Tall, built like a man who still split his own firewood. A wide black leather belt with a service weapon on his hip. He walked into the Hensley kitchen. He took his hat off. He looked at me. He said one thing. Show me the book. I brought back the backpack. I laid the black leather journal in front of him. Sheriff Wade Buckley pulled out the chair across from me. He opened the journal. He read every page. It took him an hour. Merle refilled his coffee once. He did not drink it. When he was done, he closed the book. He put his hand flat on the leather cover. He closed his eyes. He whispered something, just to himself. It sounded like a name. Then he opened his eyes and he looked at me. Caleb Whitmore. His voice was steady. Your grandfather was one of the finest men who ever lived in this county. I am sorry it took us 32 years to know it. He tapped one finger on the cover of the journal. There are 340 families in Whitley County who lost their retirement money in 1992. Some of them lost their farms. Some of them lost their houses. Some of them lost more than that. He looked at Wendell. Wendell nodded. Wade turned back to me. Wendell and Merle here lost $47,000 in the fall of '92. That was money they had put aside for their daughter Ellie to go to nursing school in Lexington. When it was gone, she went to work at the feed store instead. Worked there her whole adult life. Died 6 years ago of the kind of cancer they would have caught early if she had ever had health insurance. Wendell was crying. I was not making a sound. Tears just running down that 72-year-old man's face and dripping off his jaw onto the kitchen table. Merle had one hand on his back. Sheriff Buckley kept his eyes on me. That is one family, one out of 340. And you have brought me the man who killed my brother. He tapped the book again. We have a lot of work to do. I stayed at the Hensley farm for 11 days. I want to tell you every one of those 11 days. I don't have time for all of it. But let me tell you 3 things. If this story is touching your heart right now, please subscribe. This channel shares stories about hope, about second chances, about finding a place to belong, and leave a comment down below. Have you ever read a letter from someone you loved who was already gone? Now let me tell you what Caleb found next. The first thing. On the 4th morning, Odessa Callahan drove up the long gravel drive in a 1988 Ford station wagon. Powder blue, wood paneling on the sides. She had a hat box in her arms. She came into the Hensley kitchen. Merle poured her a cup of coffee. She sat down across from me. She set the hat box on the table. She said, I promised your mama I would keep these for you until you were old enough to understand them. I have been carrying that promise around like a stone in my shoe for 12 years, honey. I would like to put it down now. She pushed the hat box across the table to me. I opened it. Inside were letters. 47 letters, all of them addressed to Silas Roland Hollister, General Delivery, Cedar Hollow, Kentucky. All of them stamped in red across the front, return to sender, address unknown, all of them in my mother's handwriting. I picked up the top one. It was dated May 8th, 1996, 2 years before I was even born. The envelope had been slit open. Someone had read the letter, sealed the envelope back up. I pulled the letter out. 2 pages, onion skin paper. Elena Hollister's careful looping cursive. I still remember you. I still remember every one of the songs you sang to me when I was little. I still remember the way the light came through the pines on the ridge at sunset. I did not run from you. I want you to know that. I ran from the men who were watching our house. I ran from the men in the black cars who parked at the end of our drive for a whole week in April. You told me to run, and so I ran. I hope one day I can come home. I hope one day this will all be over and I can come home to Cedar Hollow. Until then, Daddy, I love you. I love you every day. I write these letters and put them in the mail, even though I know Vivian's people will get to them before you do. I write them because putting them in the mail is the only way I know how to still be your daughter. Your Elena. I read all 47 letters. It took me 2 days. Every letter started with Daddy and ended with your Elena. Every letter was written between 1996 and 2008. The last one was written 3 weeks before she died on Interstate 65. The last one had a sentence in it I read 17 times. Daddy Nathaniel knows everything. He has known since before he asked me to marry him. He said he would help me find you. He said he would not let them touch our Caleb. I think after all these years, I have finally found a good man. Nathaniel, my father. Nathaniel Whitmore had known. He had married my mother to protect her, to protect me. And when she died in that car accident on Interstate 65, 6 weeks after she wrote that letter, he had raised me alone for 6 years in a Louisville mansion with Vivian's people, watching him from every corner of every room. And then he had married Vivian, because he had no choice, because he had a 6-year-old son to protect. And then 10 months ago, when I was 17, my daddy's heart had suddenly, mysteriously, without any warning, given out at the age of 54. I sat on the front porch of the Hensley farmhouse at sunset on the 6th day. I stood, for the first time, that my father had not died of a heart attack. The second thing, on the 8th day, a man I had never seen before came walking up the Hensley Drive. I was 35 years old, dark hair, blue eyes. He was wearing a canvas barn coat and boots that had been broken in on a real farm. He looked like my grandfather in a photograph I had seen in the journal. He walked up to the porch. He took off his cap. He said, Caleb, my name is Marcus Ridley. I am your uncle. Your grandfather was my father. I have been looking for you since your daddy died. He held out his hand. I could not shake it. My hands did not work. He waited. I was good at waiting. Finally, I said, how? My mother was Silas's second wife. She died the day I was born. Silas raised me by himself in a little house on the far side of the ridge until I was 5 years old. And then Cornelius Ashcroft tried to burn our house down, with me inside it. A neighbor pulled me out. Silas sent me away that same night. I grew up in Cincinnati under my grandmother's name. I have been Marcus Ridley for 30 years. He looked at me. But I am Silas's son, and you are my sister Elena's boy, and that makes you the only family I have left in this world. I stood up. I stepped off the porch. I walked over to that man I had never met before in my life, and my uncle put his arms around me. And for the first time in 12 years, I let somebody hold me while I cried. The third thing. On the 11th day, Sheriff Wade Buckley sat down at the Hensley kitchen table across from me and my Uncle Marcus and old Mr. Elias Thornton, who had driven all the way down from Louisville the day before. Sheriff Buckley had a manila folder in front of him. He said Special Agent Corinne Delacroix of the IRS Criminal Investigation Division opened a formal federal case this morning. The United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Kentucky has agreed to prosecute. We have enough in your grandfather's journal, plus the medical records your uncle got from Dr. Purcell in Lexington regarding your father's death, to bring charges against Vivian Ashcroft Whitmore. He paused. There is a public hearing scheduled at the Gene Snyder Federal Courthouse in Louisville, 9 days from now. He looked at me. Caleb, you do not have to be there. You can send a statement. You can let the lawyers handle it. Nobody in this county would think less of you if you never had to look that woman in the face again. I looked around the kitchen. Merle was standing at the sink. She had not turned around. Wendell was at the coffee pot. His hand was still. Marcus was beside me. His hand was on the back of my chair. Odessa had driven out that morning with a hatbox of chicken and dumplings, and she was sitting in the corner by the wood stove with a piece of it in her lap. I stood up. I picked up my grandfather's black leather journal. I held it against my chest. I said, I'm going to Louisville, and I am not going alone. Wendell Hensley turned around at the coffee pot. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen on any man's face directed at me before. He said, no, son, you are not. 9 days. That is how long it took to build the case that took down the Ashcroft family. 9 days that felt like 9 years. 9 days of Uncle Marcus on the phone with Special Agent Corinne Delacroix of the IRS. 9 days of Sheriff Wade Buckley driving up and down Route 92 between Cedar Hollow and Corbin and Louisville. 9 days of Mr. Elias Thornton sitting at the Hensley kitchen table with a yellow legal pad writing down every date, every dollar, every signature Vivian had ever forged. 9 days of Merle Hensley cooking 3 meals a day for 8 people and never once complaining. 9 days of Wendell out in the barn every morning at 5, doing the work that had to be done, humming an old Hank Williams tune under his breath. And me, in the little bedroom with the dolls on the shelf, reading 47 letters from a dead mother over and over, until I had them memorized, until I could hear her voice again after 12 years of silence saying my name. Caleb, Caleb, honey, Mama loves you. Rex Donovan was the first to fall. They picked him up at the Louisville International Airport on a Thursday afternoon. He had a first-class ticket to Zurich, a carry-on with $50,000 cash sewn into the lining. But he was already caught, and he knew it. Because Special Agent Delacroix had another card in her hand, a card she had received 48 hours earlier from an unexpected source, from a young man in Louisville who had walked into the FBI field office alone with a lawyer and put a small USB drive on the desk. Rex Donovan sat down across from Special Agent Delacroix in an interrogation room. She slid the drive across the table. She said one thing. She said, Mr. Donovan, you have 40 minutes to decide whether you spend the rest of your life in a federal prison or the rest of your life in witness protection. He took 11 minutes. He gave her Vivian. He gave her the wire transfers. He gave her the offshore shell companies. He gave her the doctor in Lexington who had been quietly refilling Nathaniel Whitmore's prescription with a different medication for 8 months before my father died. He gave her all of it because he had seen what was on that USB drive, and he knew he was already sunk. The hearing was set for the following Monday morning, 10 a.m., Gene Snyder United States Courthouse, downtown Louisville. We drove up together in a caravan. Wendell and Merle in the powder blue station wagon. Uncle Marcus and me in Marcus's old pickup truck. Odessa in her own car. Sheriff Buckley in his cruiser leading the way, blue lights off driving the speed limit, but with a quiet authority that made every other car on Interstate 75 slide over into the right lane and let us pass. Della Hensley rode in the back of Marcus's truck with a covered casserole dish on her lap. She said if we had to sit in a federal courthouse all day, we were not doing it on courthouse cafeteria food. Della was Wendell's 22-year-old niece. She worked at the feed store in Cedar Hollow. She had come out to the farm 3 days after I got there, brought a pan of cornbread, and quietly started helping. She had a slow smile and steady hands, and she had not asked me a single question about my life that I did not want to answer. I want you to picture this. A young woman in a Sunday dress, riding in the back of a pickup truck, down Interstate 75 on a Monday morning, on her way to a federal courthouse, holding a Pyrex dish of scalloped potatoes on her knees. Because that is Cedar Hollow, Kentucky. That is what those people do. I wore a suit. Uncle Marcus took me shopping the Saturday before, to a men's store on Bardstown Road that had been there since 1948. The tailor was 90 years old. He measured me without saying a word. He pinned the cuffs. The suit was charcoal gray. Simple. Clean. I looked at myself in the three-way mirror of that little shop. I did not recognize the boy in the mirror. 11 days earlier, I had been standing in the rain with $47 in my pocket. Now I was standing in a $200 suit with an uncle's hand on my shoulder. The Gene Snyder Courthouse is a big white building with columns. We walked up the wide stone steps at 9:45 in the morning, through the metal detectors, down a long marble hallway that smelled like old wood polish. We came to a set of tall oak doors, room 217. I stopped. My hand was on the door. On the other side of that door was the woman who had thrown me out of my own home at midnight in a garbage bag, and I did not know what I was going to do when I looked her in the face. Uncle Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "You have all of us with you, every step, all the way through." I opened the door. The courtroom was full. I had not expected that. The gallery was packed, shoulder to shoulder. Reporters in the back with notebooks, federal prosecutors at the front table. And behind the prosecutor's table in the first four rows were people from Cedar Hollow. Farmers, their wives, old men with hearing aids, old women with tissues balled up in their fists, a young mother with a baby on her hip, the postmaster, the pharmacist, the pastor of the Methodist Church, two of Wendell's cousins from over in Corbin, Ellie Hensley's best friend from nursing school who had graduated and become a nurse and never forgotten the girl who never got to. 340 families. Some of the people who had survived it were sitting in that courtroom. They had driven up together, in vans, in pickup trucks, in their Sunday clothes, from a town 200 miles away. To watch. When I walked in, the front row stood up, then the row behind them stood up, then the row behind that. By the time I reached the low wooden gate that separated the gallery from the well of the court, every person in that courtroom was on their feet. And nobody was saying a word. I have thought about that moment every day of my life since. Vivian was already at the defense table. She was wearing a gray suit that cost more than most of the cars in the parking lot. Her hair was pulled back in a tight, severe knot. Her lawyer was a man from a firm in New York with a Rolex watch that caught the fluorescent light every time he moved his wrist. She did not turn around when we came in. She did not turn around when the whole gallery stood up. She sat very still, staring at the wooden panel of the defense table. Preston was at the very back of the gallery, alone, in a black suit that fit him wrong across the shoulders. He looked 10 years older than he had 3 weeks earlier. His hair was uncombed. His eyes were red. He did not look at his mother. He did not look at me either. He looked at the floor. The prosecutor was a woman in her 40s named Catherine Amory. She stood up. She adjusted the microphone. And for the next 40 minutes, in a voice that was not loud, but was so clear it filled every corner of that room, Catherine Amory told the story of what had happened to Cedar Hollow, Kentucky in the fall of 1992. She told them about Cornelius Ashcroft, about the $12.4 million, about the shell companies, about the bearer bonds, about the courier my grandfather had intercepted on a rural railroad outside Charleston, West Virginia, in November of that year, about the false wall he had built with his own hands. She told them about Frank Buckley. She told them about the 12 years of returned letters. She told them about Nathaniel Whitmore's slowly poisoned heart. And she told them about a boy who got thrown out of a mansion on his 18th birthday and walked 3 miles in the rain to a Greyhound station because it was the only place he had left to go. While she spoke, I looked around the room. Every farmer in the first 4 rows was leaning forward. Some of them were crying. An old woman in the 3rd row had her hand pressed over her mouth. She had lost her husband in 2004 to the stress of not being able to retire on time. She had never been able to prove why, until now. The federal judge, an older man named the Honorable Robert F. Cadwallader, was writing carefully on a yellow pad. His face gave nothing away. Vivian sat very still. The prosecutor was almost done when it happened. Catherine Amory had turned toward Judge Cadwallader. She was about to make her ask for immediate remand. Vivian's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, before Ms. Amory concludes, my client wishes to speak." The prosecutor's mouth fell open. Judge Cadwallader took his reading glasses off. He looked at the defense table. "Mr. Sinclair, Is your client aware that anything she says on the record can and will be used against her? She is aware, Your Honor. And you have advised her against speaking extensively, Your Honor. Very well, Mrs. Whitmore. You may stand. Vivian stood. She turned around for the first time since we had walked in. She looked at me. She looked at me for a very long time. I did not look away. Because I was not this boy in the bag anymore. I was the grandson of Silas Rowland Hollister, and the son of Elena Hollister, and the son of Nathaniel Whitmore, and the nephew of Marcus Ridley, and I had 11 days of the Hensley farm in me, and 47 letters from my mother in me, and I did not have to look away from Vivian Ashcroft ever again. She saw it, I watched her see it, and whatever she had planned to say when she stood up, she did not say. Instead, she looked at Uncle Marcus. She said, "You." Her voice cracked in the middle of the one word. She said it again, louder. "You. My father told me you were dead. My father told me you had died in that fire in 1995. He told me at the dinner table. I was 15 years old. He said the Hollister problem was over, and I did not need to worry anymore." Uncle Marcus did not move. Her voice broke completely. "You are alive." And in that moment right there, I understood something about Vivian Ashcroft that changed the shape of my anger for the rest of my life. She had believed her father. She had believed him for 30 years. She had built her entire life, every decision, every marriage, every cruelty, on the foundation of a lie her father had told her at the dinner table when she was 15 years old. And now in a federal courtroom on a Monday morning, that foundation was cracking under her feet in front of 200 witnesses, and she could not stop it. She was still a monster. She had still murdered my father with a slow prescription over 8 months. She had still thrown me out into the rain. She had still, 3 weeks earlier, sent Rex Donovan up a mountain to end my life. But she was a monster who had been built by other monsters. And that was a thing worth knowing. I did not forgive her. I have not forgiven her since. I do not know if I ever will. But I understood her. For one strange, terrible, clear moment in that courtroom, I understood her. And then she was sitting down again with her lawyer, whispering furiously in her ear, and Judge Cadwallader was banging his gavel for order. The bailiff was reaching for the handcuffs, and Preston stood up in the back of the gallery. I did not see him at first. Neither did anyone else. He was so quiet. Then he stepped into the aisle, and he started walking down the center aisle of the courtroom. Slowly, his hands empty. Everyone in the gallery turning their heads to watch him pass. Vivian's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, this is highly irregular." "Sit down, Mr. Sinclair." The judge was watching Preston. Preston stopped at the low wooden gate that separated the gallery from the well of the court. He said very quietly, "Your Honor, my name is Preston Ashcroft. I am the defendant's son. I have a statement I need to make. On the record." Vivian turned in her seat. Her face went white. She said, "Preston, sit down." Preston did not look at her. He looked at Judge Cadwallader. Judge Cadwallader said, "Come forward, Mr. Ashcroft. You will be placed under oath." Preston sat in the witness chair. He put his hand on the Bible. He swore the oath. He looked once, just once, at Vivian. Then he did not look at her again. He looked at me. He said, "Caleb, I have been waiting 3 years to tell you what I am about to say. If you never want to speak to me again after today, I understand. I do not expect anything. I do not deserve anything." He drew a breath. "When I was 12 years old, I found a box in my mother's closet. In the box was a diary. It was written by your father, Nathaniel Whitmore. I was keeping a record. He knew my mother was dangerous. He knew my mother's family was worse. He was writing everything down." The whole courtroom was silent. "In the diary, your father wrote about the day you were born. He wrote about the promise he had made to your mother in the hospital when you were 3 days old." Preston's voice broke. He steadied it. "Your father also wrote about me." I could not breathe. "When your father was 22 years old, before he ever met your mother, he had a brief relationship, 6 weeks, with a woman 10 years older than him. It ended badly. He did not know she was pregnant when they parted. He did not know until years later when my mother came back into his life, long after your mother was gone, and presented him with a birth certificate and a paternity test and a set of demands." Preston's hands were shaking on the arms of the witness chair. "My mother is Vivian Ashcroft, the woman my mother married when I was 3 years old. The man I called father for 7 years is not my biological father. Nathaniel Whitmore, your father, was my biological father." The gallery made a sound, not a loud sound, a soft sound, 200 people drawing in breath at the same time. I did not hear it. I heard nothing. I was 6 years old again. I was standing at my mother's graveside. I was watching my father lift a little boy named Preston onto his shoulders at Preston's 5th birthday party at the mansion in Louisville. I was remembering the way my daddy had ruffled Preston's hair, the way he had looked at Preston sometimes when he thought no one was watching, with so much guilt, with so much love. Preston said, "Your father married my mother because she showed up on our doorstep with a paternity test in one hand and a lawyer in the other. She told him she would take me away and he would never see me again unless he married her. He wanted to raise his son, both his sons. He thought he could protect you both from inside the house. He was wrong. He tried." Preston rubbed the back of his hand across his eyes. "I have been carrying this for 7 years, Caleb. I did not know how to tell you. My mother's people, they would have," he stopped. "For the last 3 years, I have been recording my mother's phone conversations with Rex Donovan. I have been keeping the recordings on a hard drive in a safety deposit box in Lexington. There are dozens of hours of audio, every one of them relevant to the case Miss Amory has just outlined, every one of them detailing what my mother did to your father, what she planned to do to you, what she did on the phone with Rex Donovan the night before the storm." He reached into his suit jacket. He took out a small USB drive. He handed it to Judge Cadwallader's clerk. "I cannot make my mother a good person. I cannot bring your father back. I cannot undo what has been done to you, or to those people sitting in the first 4 rows of this courtroom." He looked at me. "But I can tell the truth, and I can tell you that we have the same father. And I can tell you that I am so sorry for every day of every year that I have known and did not tell you." He stopped talking. The courtroom was silent. Vivian was staring at her son. Her mouth was open. She said very quietly, "Preston, what have you done?" Preston looked at her. For the last time, I think, though, I did not know it in that moment. He said, "I told the truth, Mama. Somebody had to." Judge Cadwallader took a 15-minute recess. He came back. He denied bail. He remanded Vivian to federal custody pending trial. The bailiff walked over to the defense table. Vivian stood up. She let them cuff her hands behind her back. She let them lead her toward the side door of the courtroom. She stopped once. She turned. She looked at me. She said, "I hope you sleep at night." I said, "I hope you find out one day that your father lied to you about a lot more than just Marcus." She did not answer. They let her out. The door closed. Sheriff Wade Buckley walked over to the prosecution table. He shook Catherine Amory's hand. Then he crossed to where Wendell and Merle Hensley were sitting. He knelt down beside their pew like a man kneeling at an altar. He took Merle's hand. He said, "Ellie can rest now." Merle put her forehead against Sheriff Buckley's shoulder. She wept. The whole first 4 rows of the gallery wept with her. If this story has held you tonight, please consider subscribing. Because somewhere out there, another lonely soul needs to find Cedar Hollow too. Now let me tell you how it ended. I did not take the Whitmore mansion. That was the first decision. The federal government seized the estate, all $12.4 million of it, plus the interest that had accrued over 33 years, plus every asset the Ashcroft family had built on the back of that stolen money. The final restitution figure was $28 million. Catherine Amory came to me 2 weeks after the hearing. She sat in the Hensley kitchen with a folder full of paperwork. She told me the whistleblower provisions of the IRS code entitled me to a percentage, a significant percentage. She said I could take $4 million for myself. I said no. I said, "Give it back to the people it was stolen from." She said gently, "Caleb, that is a lot of money." I said, "It is not my money. It is not my grandfather's money. It is Wendell and Merle's $47,000. It is 339 other families' money. It goes back." She looked at me a long time. Then she nodded. She said, "Your grandfather would be proud." I said, "I am not doing it for my grandfather. I am doing it for the 340 families." Then after a moment, "And I am doing it a little bit for my mother." I kept 2 things from the estate. The first was my father's pocket watch. It had belonged to my grandfather, Silas. He had given it to my father the day my father married my mother. It was gold, engraved on the back with 3 initials, NNJW, and a date, 06/14/2005. I wear it on a chain in my vest pocket every day of my life. The second thing I kept was my mother's Bible. Vivian had thrown it in the trash 12 years ago. Odessa's cousin, who worked as the housekeeper at the Whitmore mansion, had pulled it out and hidden it in her own attic. When she heard what had happened in the courtroom, she drove it out to the Hensley farm in a shoebox. Elena Hollister Whitmore's Bible. Verses underlined all through it. Little notes in the margins in her careful cursive. That Bible sits on my nightstand. I read a page of it every night before I go to sleep. Preston went to trial. He pled guilty to reduced charges, obstruction, conspiracy, failure to report a federal crime. He served 18 months at a minimum security facility in West Virginia. He was released last spring. I paid for his defense. I want you to understand something. I did not do that because I forgave him. I did it because he was the son of my father, because he sat in a witness chair and told the truth on the record when he did not have to. Because when I looked at him in that courtroom, I saw under the arrogance and the cruelty of 19 years, a scared boy who had figured out at 12 years old that his mother was a monster and had spent 7 years figuring out how to do the one right thing he was capable of doing. The Sunday after Preston got out of prison, he drove down to Cedar Hollow. He did not call ahead. He pulled his rented sedan into the Hensley driveway at 10 in the morning. He sat in the car for 20 minutes before he got out. Then he came up onto the porch. I opened the screen door. He said, "I know I don't deserve to be here. I will leave if you want." I said, "Come in. Merle's got biscuits." He came in. He sat at that big wooden kitchen table across from Wendell. Merle put a plate in front of him. He ate. He did not say much. Neither did I. Wendell told a long, slow story about a bull he had once traded for a used tractor, and the story took 20 minutes, and by the end of it, Preston was almost smiling. Before he left, he stood in the driveway with me. He said, "I am staying in Louisville. I am working for a nonprofit. It helps foster kids age out of the system with a place to land." I said, "That is a good thing to do." He said, "It is the least I can do." He said, can I come back down sometime?" I said, "Yeah, you can come back." He drove away. He has been down 4 times since. I do not know that we will ever be what most brothers are, but he is my brother, and that is a thing worth knowing. 14 months after the hearing. It is a Sunday afternoon in March. The sun is out. It is warm for the first time this year. Wendell Hensley says the ground is finally soft enough to run the plow through the vegetable patch behind the house. The old cabin on Miller's Ridge is gone. I had it taken down beam by beam last summer. I saved the timbers that had my grandfather's carvings on them. Every X, every date, every angry warning. I saved the beam that said, "They think I'm crazy." Good, let them think it. I built a new house on the ridge. 2 stories, cedar, a wide porch that wraps around 3 sides, big windows on the east so you can see the sunrise come up over the Cumberland foothills every morning of your life. No lead sheeting, no plaster walls, no secrets in the timbers. The old carved beams are on the interior wall of the living room, right above the fireplace. Every visitor asks about them. I tell them about my grandfather, about the county auditor who was not crazy. Cedar Hollow has come back. The Bijou Theater reopened last October. They played It's a Wonderful Life, and the mayor of Corbin came down and cut a ribbon. Odessa's Diner has a new kitchen. The feed store has expanded. Della runs the garden supply side now. She said it was easier to sell people things they wanted to grow than things they wanted to eat. Sheriff Wade Buckley was reelected in November. He ran unopposed. There is a bronze plaque in the Whitley County Courthouse now. It has his brother's name on it. Deputy Frank Buckley, 1957 to 1993. A good man who saw what was there. The cemetery on the hill has a new headstone. Silas Roland Hollister, 1944 to 220. An honest man. His daughter's boy brought him home. Wendell paid for it. He would not let me. This Sunday afternoon. Wendell and Merle drive up from the farm with a covered dish of chicken and dumplings. Odessa drives up in the powder blue station wagon. She has a chocolate sheet cake in the back. Also 2 pies, also her knitting. Uncle Marcus comes up in his pickup. He is finishing the fence line on the east side of the property with a young carpenter from Corbin named Hollis Meade. Sheriff Buckley arrives at 4, out of uniform, in blue jeans and a flannel shirt. He brings a bottle of good Kentucky bourbon that Wendell whistles at. Della comes last. She parks her truck in the drive. She walks up onto the porch. She is holding a covered pan of cornbread. She has her hair pulled back with a blue ribbon. She hands me the cornbread. She says, "Merle said you needed cornbread." I say Merle is always right about cornbread. Della smiles. She has a good smile. Slow, real. We stand on the porch a moment. The sun is going gold on the ridge. Della says, "You look different, Caleb." I say, "Different how?" She thinks about it. She says, "Like you belong here." I do not answer right away, because I do not know how to answer. Inside the house, 6 people are moving around the kitchen. Merle is at the stove. Wendell is opening the pickles. Uncle Marcus is in from the fence washing his hands at the sink. Odessa is cutting the pie. Sheriff Buckley is setting the table. 6 people who did not know my name 18 months ago. 6 people who are here every Sunday now. The table is set for 7. Della and I come in from the porch. She puts the cornbread down. Merle points at the seat next to Wendell. She says, "That one is yours, honey. Sit down, it's getting cold." I sit down. There is a chair at the head of the table for Wendell, a chair at the foot for Merle, 2 chairs on the near side for Marcus and Odessa, 1 chair on the far side for Sheriff Buckley, and 2 chairs on the side by the window. 1 for Della, 1 for me, right in the middle of that table. We hold hands. That is how we do it now. Every Sunday, around Merle's kitchen table. Whoever is there, we hold hands and Wendell says the blessing. Because Wendell is the oldest, and it is his family. Wendell's grip is warm and rough. Della's grip on the other side is soft and small. Wendell says, "Lord, we thank you for this food. We thank you for the hands that grew it and the hands that cooked it. We thank you for the ones we lost and the ones we found. We thank you for bringing our boy home to a table where there was always a chair waiting for him. Amen." Everybody says amen, everybody except me, because I cannot speak. Because when Wendell said our boy and a chair waiting for him, something in my chest cracked open all the way. Merle sees it. Of course Merle sees it. She does not say a word. She just gets up and comes around the table and puts her arms around me from behind and holds me while I cry into Wendell's mashed potatoes. Nobody looks away. Nobody looks embarrassed. Nobody rushes it. They just wait. The way people who love you wait. I want to tell you something before we say goodbye. My grandfather told me when I was 6 years old to look for the warm place in the walls. For 12 years, I thought he was talking about a fireplace. Then for 15 days, I thought he was talking about a false wall stuffed with gold certificates and stolen bearer bonds worth $12.4 million. I was wrong both times. The warm place in the walls is not a place at all. It is a table. It is a table with hands held around it. It is a chair with your name on it. It is a plate that gets set for you whether you show up or not, because these particular people have decided that your absence would be felt. That is what my grandfather spent 30 years alone in a cabin to keep safe for a grandson he was never allowed to raise. I know that now. I know it every Sunday at 4 o'clock when Della drives up with a pan of cornbread and Merle points at the chair and Wendell says the blessing that cracks me open one more time. Every single time. Grandpa, I found it. I finally found the warm place in the walls. If this story meant something to you tonight, if you cried a little, if some old wound stirred a little inside you, would you leave a comment for me down below? Tell me about the table you belong to. Tell me about the chair somebody set for you when you thought no one would. Tell me about the person who let you cry into their mashed potatoes and did not say a word. Because those stories matter. They matter more than the $12 million matters. They matter more than the courtroom matters. They are the only thing that ever mattered. Subscribe if you have not. Come back next week. I have another story to tell you. And in the meantime, if you are the one out there alone in the dark tonight, on the wrong side of a locked door, keep walking. There is a warm place in the walls somewhere down the road. I promise you. Good night, friends. Good night from Cedar Hollow.